Okay, so welcome to the HHSRS meeting that we've got here in the offices today. So we're going to go through our scoring of the building in question, Castle Towers. So I'd just like to introduce each other. So do you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Paul Stevens. I'm the Principal Building Control Surveyor for the Joint Inspection Team.
Thanks, Paul.
I'm Eric, Principal Fire Engineer for the Joint Inspection Team.
My name's Richard Chubb. I'm the Principal Environmental Health Officer today.
My name's Stefan Maker. I'm the Principal EHO with the Joint Inspection Team.
Okay, so today we're going to be going through a discussion basically of how bad this building is. So we're going to be going through each of the relevant matters that are contained in the addendum and effectively scoring it and including our evidence for why we are concerned about that item or not concerned about that item. So we're going to kick off with number one. So you'll see in column A, which is the presence of an external cladding system and the extent / location to which the building is covered and the absence of any evidence that it is non-combustible. So I'm going to first of all go over to you, Stefan. You've read the cladding report. What can you tell me about what we saw from the documentation that came from the building owner?
It's possibly best if I combine that with what we actually saw on the day as well.
Okay, that's a good idea. Yeah.
So the majority of the walls, the external walls, they consisted of brick. It was a brick cavity wall, but not a traditional type brick cavity wall with 2 leads of brick. It was an outer leaf of brick supported by a steel framing system. There was a cavity. The cladding report said inside that was combustible polyisocanurate insulation.
Let's just call it PIR for the training today.
Yeah. Behind that there was 2 layers of plasterboard separating it from the inside flat.
Okay, yeah.
We also had silver coloured panels, cladding panels. The cladding report says these are insulated sandwich panels, so 2 layers of aluminium sandwiching a PIR core.
Okay.
So again, that's combustible. We've also got some spandrel panels. These are panels that are above and below windows, covering the kind of floor area. They consisted of, I think it was an outer layer of aluminium, behind which was 2 layers of plywood sandwiching an extruded polystyrene core. So again, that's combustible.
Yeah. What do we know about extruded polystyrene cores then, Paul? Is it particularly combustible?
Well, the testing on previous spandrel panels does show it is highly combustible.
Okay, sure. I'm kind of thinking that Lacanau House that had some sort of
that's correct.
spandrel panel problem, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess moving on from those sort of systems, any other systems that we saw on the building?
We also had some glazed spandrel panels. These aren't mentioned in the cladding report, so all we can say about these is they've got outer surface is glass. There's some kind of grey coloured material behind them. Possibly could be insulation there, possibly not. So I think that's something that needs further investigation.
Okay, great. So moving around the building, we saw balconies. John, do you want to talk about the balconies? What they were made of? How concerned were you?
Yeah, they were a steel frame balcony, timber struts, and a surface of deck board.
Yeah.
But on the underside of those, the soffit had a steel plate. So if there's a fire underneath, the steel plate really is going to deflect most of the flame and heat from it. So don't really see fire leaping from balcony to balcony. They were pretty good, no bigger than maybe 2 meters by 1 meter.
Okay.
But we did see plenty of combustible materials on them and a couple of balconies with barbecues.
That's right. I remember seeing a couple of bags of rubbish on one of them and some artificial grass which had been put down probably to make it less slippy on there.
Yeah.
Paul, how were they sort of connected to the building?
So these are cantilever balconies.
Yeah.
So there's still frames supporting the balconies from internally.
Okay.
They're deemed to be cantilever. They're in series, so the ones above each other. Combustible wise, as a building, very low.
Okay.
It had part glazing.
Mm-hmm.
Glazing can contribute to fire spread, but apart from that, I deem it to be lower as a risk.
How would the glazing contribute to fire spread?
It's laminate, it contains laminate.
Is the laminate in the middle or on the outside, or?
It depends on the glazing panel, the design.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I think I remember seeing in the flat that I went into on the 4th floor. I think it looked like there was glazing and then a very thin film, which presumably is the sort of glue that's holding it together if it fractures. Would that be an issue? I mean,
it depends which type of actual analysis of the glass, what type of glass it is, how it's manufactured.
Oh, right, okay, great. Right, so thinking around the building from the front aspect, so we're going to call the front aspect the east in this case. So that was facing onto the road. We had an access sort of straight through the middle, through some flower beds to the front door. I'm kind of thinking, what sort of penetrations did we see coming through the wall system, John?
There were multiple. There were some that were air vents, plastic vents on the outside, typically through the brick. Also through the brick, there were what looked like the original boiler air ventilation.
Mm-hmm.
So there were 2 of them, one presumably for inlet, one for outlet.
Mm-hmm.
A number of the flats had their boilers replaced with a balanced flue system. So another pipe, but the old flue system was still there.
Yeah.
So some of the flats had maybe 3 penetrations associated with boilers.
Yeah.
What else did we see? Oh, and there were some trickle vents, especially near those spandrel panels above the windows.
Any electric lights? I'm trying to
There
think.
were,
There was the
each
balcony.
balcony had an electric light.
Okay. What can happen with that?
It's very unusual for something to go wrong with the wiring itself as it comes through the wall, or it can do.
Mm-hmm.
But more typically, there could be some kind of electrical issue with the lamp itself, which could generate heat and could lead to a fire.
Okay.
But it's less likely, less of a risk, I suppose, on the brick finish.
Yeah.
More of a risk if the wall surface itself is combustible.
Okay. Stefan, did you pick up anything else around the external wall system?
Yeah. We also need to consider fire stopping to the penetrations.
Yeah. So that's sort of stopping a fire from, say, the boiler flue or something getting into the wall system.
That's right. So where the boiler flue penetrates the external wall, it would need to be fire stopped to stop fire getting into the wall system.
Yeah.
In one of the flats we went into, in the kitchen, there was a boiler flue penetrating the external wall. It was a brick wall on the outside, and we could see that the penetration hadn't been fire stopped on the kitchen side. So there was a way for fire to get, if there was a fire in the kitchen, there was a way there for it to get into the cavity to the brick wall, and inside there we've got combustible insulation.
Right.
I believe there was also an issue with cavity barriers around windows.
That's right. The Cladding report, it did have a look at one window, and it identified that there were no cavity barriers around the window opening. You would need cavity barriers there again to stop the fire inside the flat getting into the cavity to the wall.
And I think there is metallic, obviously cladding, rain screen cladding to the top floors, and there's also earthing to that.
That's right.
It's quite an unusual sort of shape, wasn't it, with a lot of mono-pitched roofs running at different angles from each other at different levels, wasn't it? So I'm kind of thinking most of those cladding panels were on the upper floors. Certainly when I looked on Google Earth and had a little spin around the building, they all seem to be on that sort of central core area, don't they? So, John, in terms of how concerned are we with the location of them? Was there anything, was there a route for fire from a flat to get into them?
It was difficult,
Right.
I think.
Yeah,
Fire.
I think I agree.
Not beyond the realms of possibility, but really unlikely.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to have a fire in that building. You know, there were those duplex flats on the shorter side of the building.
Yeah.
There were Velux windows there, and those Velux windows were pretty close to the silver cladding stuff.
Yeah.
So if I had a severe fire in there and it breaks out through the volux, and we've got some flaming combustion coming out of there, possibly it could ignite the panels, and then it could go up through the panels, but there's nothing really that communicates with residences, with dwellings or flats.
Okay, yeah.
So
inside
becomes almost quite
those,
isolated.
so inside those panels, from memory, I think I can remember that, wasn't it on the edge of the staircase at the very top? So there was nothing.
Yeah, it's kind of on the side walls.
Flat,
There's a glazed front to the staircase enclosure. It's kind of the side walls, wasn't it?
Yeah,
that's right.
And they weren't. Usually, we would, it covered a relatively large area, these sandwich panels, and usually we would be very concerned about that. In this case, we didn't have any windows or
no
penetrations for vents opening onto these panels. So
So the smoke from any combustion's more than likely to go to the outside rather than coming in, because there wasn't really any way for it to come into that building.
I anticipate that if a fire got into the panels, in most cases that would be a spectacular looking fire from the outside. It would look incredible.
Yeah. But
the risk of it would be reasonably low.
What about if any of the outer parts of the metal bits fell off? I suppose it's not combustible anyway, that outer skin, is it? So it's just going to expose the insulation.
If anything, if there's sufficient heat from those panels with the glazed front to the staircase enclosure, it might cause some of the glazing to fall out. There's some projectile hazard potentially, but that's a long way into a fire.
Yeah.
And I'd imagine that the fire service is either well on top of it by then or has evacuated the building by then.
That makes sense. Anything else from the outside of the building then? So involving the external cladding system, kind of thinking it's probably covered all of that.
I must note the cladding is surrounding the firefighting stairs.
Okay, yes. Why is that an issue?
We're looking at protection of means of escape. So there's windows on the escape route, which there is in this case. If there is a cladding fire, that could hinder the evacuation.
Another thing we need to consider is cavity barriers within the cavities to these wall systems. The Cladding reports, it didn't really say whether there were or whether there weren't any cavity barriers. There should be, to stop, if the fire does get into the cavity, to stop the fire spreading around. But I think so. We haven't got any evidence whether there are or aren't cavity barriers. But I think it's probably reasonable for us to assume that cavity barriers are inadequate.
Yeah. I think I remember in the cladding report they'd taken out a brick effectively at the sort of junction between the outer wall and one of the floor plates. And there didn't seem to be any evidence of any non-combustible fire break in that area. So I think it's fair to assume here that there are not. Now, John, what can happen in terms of firefighting if a fire did get into that cavity?
Nightmare.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare because you can't really access the fire. There's no flame to be seen, so you have to open up the wall.
These are the brick walls now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you typically the fire service is going to fight the fire from inside. It might fight it from outside if we can get a high reach appliance to it, work from a cage or top of a ladder. But more typically they'll fight the fire from the inside, chop away at the plasterboard to try and expose the fire in the cavity, right back to the brick if necessary, and pour water onto it. Our problem with that is that 9 times out of 10, by the time our thermal image camera said this is a hot piece of wall, and we've chopped it open, put the fire out, the fire now is spread up to the next piece of wall or spread laterally, and we've got a new hot piece of wall which we have to cut open, put the fire out, a new piece of wall, cut it open, put the fire out, and before you know it, we've cut away most of the inside of the building, and it's useless.
I remember seeing in the news recently there was a building in Boston in Lincolnshire which was pretty similar to that, and they ended up actually knocking down the entire block of flats, losing tens of flats, which is obviously a bad thing. And did we see a similar type fire in Deptford in London? I think there was something similar. Certainly worth an investigation afterwards.
It's not really a risk for the means of escape phase because the building is destroyed bit by bit while the fire service are in attendance. Most of the people will have gone. In fact, all of the people have gone, will have evacuated the site. So from a resident safety point of view, not a great thing. from a resident welfare point of view, they're going to lose their flat, their place to live, probably a lot of their possessions.
Yeah.
Just a nightmare.
Yeah.
Because you've got multiple households now with nowhere to live.
Okay.
So it does cause us a problem.
So I think, unless anyone's got any other things that they want to talk about, is there anything else that you?
I think
That's pretty much
just
summed it up,
Yeah.
isn't it? Okay, so back to the spreadsheet. We're now going to be moving down our relevant matters to a lack of current suitable and sufficient fire risk assessment, lack of FRA type 1, lack of FRA type 2 or 4. So hopefully the people watching this already know what a type 1, type 2, type 3 and 4 risk assessment is. So we'll go straight into Jonathan. Have you formed any opinion on whether or not it's suitable and sufficient, and what is suitable and sufficient?
Yeah, pretty open and shut opinion.
Okay.
Frankly, the assessment has a review date on it, January 2021.
Mhm.
And since we saw the place late in 2022,
Yeah.
it's nearly 2 years out of date.
Mhm.
And so its findings really aren't relevant to the way the building is now, although there are some things in there that still relate to the building
Sure.
as it is. A lot should have changed between now and then. It had a lot of findings.
By that, do you mean maybe they haven't even addressed some of the problems that they had there?
For sure they haven't issued some
No.
of the issues that they had.
Okay.
Curiously, the assessment claims to be a type 4. There's no information in there that says they did any kind of destructive work.
Right.
I think what they mean is that there was some kind of survey done by another party at the time,
Okay.
and that assessment was taken into account.
Right. Okay. So they're taking account
All
almost a
the
bit
same.
like a PAS 9980 type.
Yeah, not that good,
Not that good, obviously.
but something like that.
Okay. Stefan, do you want to say anything about that? You've obviously read it.
no, I don't
If
think
not,
there's,
it's not a
I don't
problem.
think there's anything more.
No. Okay, so we've scored that as a 2. So out of, and 3 is obviously our worst score for this. So it's not good, but they have got one, but it's not. If they didn't have one altogether, we'd probably score that as 3, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
So they've got some form of fire risk assessment. It's probably the sort of thing that we might pass across to the local fire brigade because
For sure. There's a duty to review it regularly so as to keep it up to date, and they haven't done that.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's something that we.
So we've scored it 2. Okay, if we move on to the next one, number 3, which is the outstanding action points from the fire risk assessment. So, so the first sort of, the one that we were talking about before was a lack of current suitable and sufficient fire risk assessment. And this is
Have one,
actually
don't
the
have
action
one.
points at
Yeah.
the bottom of it that it tends to be in a table, doesn't it?
Yes, more often than not.
Okay, what do we know about that then?
Well, from the pictures in the risk assessment at the time, there were lots of combustibles being stored in most of the corridors throughout the building. That's something we did not see.
Mhm.
So something's happened.
Yeah.
Either that or they're expecting us and someone's been around and cleared it up. I'm not sure which. But certainly we did not see all those combustible materials. We saw some, but not as much as was shown in the fire risk assessment. The assessment identified things like missing nosings off the stairs.
Yeah.
So you could have potential trip hazards on the means of
They
escape.
were still there, weren't they?
They were still missing,
Yeah.
or maybe other ones were missing. We're not entirely sure which ones were missing in the first place. We still had the issues with the external walls that the risk assessment reported, but I don't think it knew independently about. And there were still some outstanding action points. So given the fact that it should have been
Still quite
reviewed in
serious
January
points as
21,
well, weren't they?
there
Yeah.
was still a lot of
Yeah.
serious points in
Okay,
2022.
I'm going to throw it to the open table. So, how do you think we should score this?
I think with them being outstanding for so long, I'd probably go in with a 3.
Okay, yeah, I think I'm of the same opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get some nods there, Paul's nodding-ish. Okay, great. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, moving on to number 4 then, which is a lack of stroke non-functioning AFD and alarm system within flats. So this is within the flats themselves. Stefan, what did you see within the flats that you went into? I know you were on the other team, weren't you?
Yeah, I saw smoke detectors to the entrance lobby, heat detector to the kitchen. So yeah, grade D LD2 alarm system. Which I think
Grade
is
D LD2.
If we were together, we just did the one flat.
Sure.
Paul did more. You did
The
more.
ones we visited is the same, yes. And in the duplex, it was a smoke detector on each landing.
That's right. Didn't we see a broken detector on the ground floor?
Yes, the
duplex?
on the duplex,
Yeah.
there was a detector that was misfunctioning. Yes.
Absolutely, yeah. I remember we said to the EHO on site that she was going to take it up with the because it was a private rented landlord, wasn't it, who owned that block, and she was going to address that immediately. Okay, great. So we've got it scored as a 0. We've got the capability within the flats. We think that there was just one that was broken. It was probably 20 years old by then. We weren't too concerned by that. There was a general picture of pretty good detection pattern within there, wasn't there? So we've scored that as a 0. So moving down on to number 5, lack of or non-functioning communal AFD. Who would like to talk about the communal AFD? What is AFD and how's that?
AFD is automatic fire detection.
Okay, yeah.
There was no detector in the firefighting stairs to operate the AOV. However, obviously there was detectors in the common corridors.
Yeah.
So we assume.
So there was no building-wide alarm system.
No
was
alarm
there?
system. There are no
was
sounds
nothing
associated
associated
with it.
with
We think it was just like an L5 system. So stuff there to operate the
smoke control, AOVs.
thank you.
From common corridors.
We didn't say panel though, did we? Did we say panel?
There's no panel.
Was there a panel for it? No. No, I didn't see anything in the cupboards downstairs. So.
And you wouldn't usually expect to see that kind of system in this building. But for example, if the block was completely clad in ACM, we thought there was a high risk of fire spreading into the cladding and then via the cladding around the building. It would probably benefit from having at least an interim communal alarm system.
Yeah.
But I think in this building we weren't so concerned about fire spreading around the building via the external walls, were we?
Yeah.
Jonathan.
Agree.
So we don't think it would benefit from a communal alarm system.
Okay. So I'm sort of going to propose that what we saw was adequate
I
for.
think the provision was appropriate.
Yeah. Okay. So I've scored that as a 0 then, satisfactory for the type of building that we're dealing with. So should we move on to the next?
Yep.
Unless anyone else wants to say anything. Lack of poorly maintained sprinkler system. Did we see any sprinklers? I didn't see any in the rooms. I wouldn't really expect it to be in a building.
At the time it was built, it wouldn't have required them.
Right.
From guidance.
Correct.
Yes. Would it do now though?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Over 30 metres, yes.
Isn't it over 11 metres?
Oh, sorry, 11. That's
Yeah.
cut out, yeah.
We'll cut that out. Okay, so let's go back onto the sprinkler system. So the sprinkler system. Paul, do you want to tell us about the building regs that's applicable at the moment for sprinkler systems? So number 6 is a lack of or poorly maintained sprinkler system. Now, I didn't see any sprinklers in this building unless you saw some in the flats that you went into.
no, there weren't any.
Nothing. So at the time of construction, which was maybe in the 2000s,
Around about 2005.
2005, what building regs were applicable and what was the sort of requirements in those days?
So the requirement for a sprinkler system was brought into approved document Part B in 2006 for over 30 metres. If the block was constructed today, anything over 11 metres would require a sprinkler or suppression system.
Yeah.
Also, more complex buildings, approved document Part B may not apply. I won't classify this building as that. You'd be looking at maybe other guidance.
Yeah.
But as the requirement at the time, no, it wasn't an issue.
Right.
What about any, because this block is in London, would there be any London-specific regulations at the time?
So, Central London, there is a requirement of Section 20 of the London Building Act. Outer parts of London wasn't privy to that, so it's more related to Central.
Okay, so this would be far enough out that it wouldn't really apply.
So that's correct.
To that. Right. Okay, so I'm going to propose that we score it as a 2.
Yeah, because although it wasn't necessarily required by regulations at the time, the presence of a sprinkler system still would benefit the building in a positive way. I think it would reduce the likelihood of a fire
Spread into the
causing
common
that.
parts.
That's right.
Yeah.
Even though it's not a lethal weapon.
Okay, so I'm going to propose 2. Any objections? No? Should we move on? Okay, number 7. Non-functioning or poorly designed, managed and maintained smoke control system in the common parts, or no weekly testing in accordance with 9991. So, what did we see in the building, John?
We saw Paul's already referred to the AOV in the staircase.
Okay.
So an opening window at eye level in the staircase enclosure. And then on the rear residential corridors, we have another AOV in that corridor, in the window, again in the window. And then, almost a bit curiously really, in the lowest part of the building, there's only the 3-floor side. Remember on that sloping roof, how it came down, there's just a 3-floor section.
Yeah. Very short travel distance there, wasn't it?
Really short,
yeah,
way under 4 metres, and then a smoke shaft in there.
Yeah.
Um,
Triggered by the overhead smoke detection, wasn't it?
on the whole, triggered by smoke detection in the corridor, although the ground floor had the whole door assembly was broken.
Yeah.
And the door was held shut against the frame by fitting the handle upside down, so the handle
That's strange, isn't it? Really,
door frame.
suspect.
Very odd.
Very suspect.
In all other cases, there was a powered arm that would open the door into the shaft.
I remember seeing on some floors the I don't know if it was a call point or it was a flashing light above some of the.
Yeah, there were overrides, smoke control overrides, and many of them. And without fail, they all had a green light, presumably for healthy power, but also a red light, which was, depending on which one we looked at, it was either a constant red light or a flashing red light.
Yeah.
And it just indicates that, well, something's wrong with the system. It's not working as it should. There may be a failure on it or similar.
Okay, so I'm kind of thinking that it's almost. Would you say it's over provided for on the front of the building then, or is there another reason on the building regs why it might have been installed like that?
Without looking at the fire strategy,
I think we're protecting the firefighting stairs,
we're
aren't we?
protecting the firefighting stairs,
That's
but
So if they open their front doors while escaping, that's not going to get straight into the staircase. Right, that makes more sense. Doesn't
so the firefighting shaft itself, under approved on Part B, you're looking at protecting smoke entering the staircase.
it? Right.
So the firefighting shaft would have been part of the fire strategy at the time, which does seem to be a requirement under the guidance.
Okay. So certification for that. What have we been provided by the council?
I don't
I think I've seen. Oh, there was a test certificate from I think it was like 2020, where they said there was some faults with it.
There was a certificate identifying faults.
Yeah, it wasn't a test pass certificate.
we?
It was a service report.
Works properly.
Yeah.
Nothing
Okay.
at all.
And I also found in the common parts there was a logbook which should have been used for recording their weekly or monthly fire test.
Yeah, it was on the notice board. Wasn't it?
Yeah, it just fell off, didn't it? And that actually said it had been tested last in 2020, I think, as well. So I think we've got a problem with management in this block, really.
Been ignored for a while.
Unless it's recorded elsewhere.
It could be.
Okay, so we've got faults on it. It's probably not been tested properly since 2020. I'm going to propose 2.
Not 3.
I was just going to say, could
Yeah.
if we're kind of possibly for the purpose of the HHSRS assessments, are we going to presume that these red lights mean the system isn't working? Or if we do presume that, then I think we should give it 3.
I remember looking to the top of the shaft that was in the
Smoke shaft,
yeah.
the short thing.
top of that. It was already open, wasn't it?
There were open vents at the top. Now that could have been causing the red lights because something was open where it shouldn't have been.
Okay.
But likewise, as we looked up that shaft, it was not non-combustible.
Yeah.
So let's rephrase.
So there was-
It was combustible.
Right.
There were elements of plastic, floor timbers. You could see the whole lot going up through the building.
The fire stopping in that shaft is very poor,
It was dreadful.
and there would also be a requirement of how the top of that shaft would be finished off.
It was incident
The
with the
roof
level of the roof,
It's
wasn't it?
basically connected with the pitch of the roof rather than extending.
Okay. So what sort of impact on the building could that have and the common areas?
Well, you
But
look
the combustible shaft means that we could spread fire from the flat into the shaft, and
Yeah.
then the shaft is on fire. And I think the point, I'll let you make your own point.
So basically, if you haven't terminated it correctly, you could get hot members escaping and over smoke dust cool down. But you could spread the fire to the roof cladding.
Right. And then might end up anywhere, I guess.
Mm.
Quite difficult to fight that fire, I guess, as well, if it's on
Yeah,
the
it's
roof
awkward.
and got a solid steel top. Okay, well, I proposed to begin with 2, but I'm kind of thinking maybe this is a 3. Serious
I
defects at
agree
3.
with that.
Yeah. Number 8, disrepair to outer surfaces. So what do we see? I kind of saw quite a lot of water ingress there. Any other?
Yeah, I think that's
Comments
it looked okay from the outside, but on the
Yeah.
inside we saw a lot of water penetration to the common areas.
It's a profile roof with a lot of angles to it, a lot of flashing details, which has led to a lot of leaks to the upper floors.
There was also a vertical crack, sort of
That's right. Yeah.
third floor in the brickwork.
There was a vertical crack. It does need sort of maybe further monitoring, but at the moment I'd classify it as some sort of movement.
Okay, so we'll probably rate that underneath the fire hazard. For example, it'd be something.
It'll be something different. Yeah.
Something
By movement, you mean
structural collapse
expansion or a movement of the building?
Movement of the brickwork, so contraction and expansion.
So do we think the water ingress is probably something to do with the roof rather than the external walls?
There would be majority of the leaks to that building would be down to the roof.
Yeah. Not all, is it? Because I saw some coming straight into the shaft at a low level, associated with the water supply pipes.
There was in the shaft. You can see there's been past issues, and there was water coming down into the shaft from the roof as well.
Yeah.
There's been past leaks.
So we're discussing water penetration here. What effect can that have on fire? Because it's the fire risk we're assessing.
You could be looking at any fire protection compartment walls that have been damaged by water.
Yeah.
The integrity of that wall becomes not obsolete.
We're going to come on to that in a bit.
Water
aren't
and
we?
plasterboard are
Discuss
friends, and the vertical shaft that was being dampened by the water coming in also contained all the electric meters to the flats.
Yeah.
The CCTV monitors were at the ground floor. The smoke controls were in the first floor, second floor?
It's either ground or
somewhere
first.
in the same shaft though.
It's either ground or first, I think, smoke control.
So there's a lot of electrical apparatus and natural safety apparatus in the shaft. That's fire safety apparatus.
Just checking. I think it was actually the ground. It was on the first floor.
First floor.
It's
Yeah,
the
I
ground
thought it
floor
was
with
above ground floor
CCTV,
CCTV.
yeah.
Above that, the smoke control stuff.
And you can most certainly see water staining on the switches and switchgear.
That's right. Yeah, on the smoke control system.
Smoke
wasn't
control
it? So I initially thought I wondered if the fault might have been associated with
It promotes the chance of an electrical failure.
Okay, so there are fire safety implications to
For sure.
to water penetration.
Question for you: with it saying disrepair to outer surfaces,
Mm.
and then drawing a distinction between, is it a leak in the roof or in the outside walls? Does it make a difference?
Depends what the thinking of the addendum was. Really.
Yeah. We may need to go back onto
Because
the addendum. and
the
look
roof
at
in
what
this
we're
case is
talking about.
definitely an outer, in all cases, I suppose, is an outer surface. I mean, nonetheless, either way, I guess that there's still a risk to the fire safety measures
Yeah,
in the building and
it's
a risk
something
of
we-
fire.
Yeah, even if it's not mentioned in the addendum, we can still include
account
it
for
if we think there's an
Yeah.
effect on fire risk.
I also saw quite a few of those ventilation, where they've cut out a brick and inserted a
Air bricks.
air brick. Yeah, I guess it would be an air brick, wouldn't it? I saw quite a few of those at low level and we actually had quite a bad rat infestation outside, didn't we? Where it's not beyond the realms of possibility that they might spot a little entry hole, get into the cavity and possible electric
Air bricks,
fire in there.
air bricks are required. They're required for suspended floors, and in this case, we had a suspended floor.
Yeah.
They are required for cross-flow ventilation.
Yeah.
In this case, there were plastic bricks that were damaged.
Mhm.
If there was any secondary or primary power supplies coming underneath that floor, they could potentially be damaged by rodents. That's correct.
Okay. So I'm going to propose a 2. We saw quite a lot of actual penetrating damp there, didn't we? Which will have an effect on the fire safety of the building. Propose a 2. Anyone second me? It's a strong 2.
I think it's a strong.
2/3. Okay. Yeah. We'll make a note of that.
You guys are the experts in this.
Well, you're the fire expert.
Yeah, I just foresee a risk from the water ingress. That's all I'm seeing.
Yeah, sure.
So 3 means seriously defective, I think. So
It's a 3, isn't it? I think I might change my mind on that.
It might be if it's causing the constant red light and the red flashing lights on the smoke control overrides. Could be. I don't know.
Let's go for a 3.
I'll leave it to you.
Let's go for a 3. Okay, moving on to the next one. We have move that down a little. So we've got disrepair to the fabric and compromising compartmentation. So, Stefan, do you want to just talk about the different compartmentation relevant matters on here, because they can be quite confusing, can't they?
Under the in the addendum, under the likelihood relevant matters, there's 3 different relevant matters that are to do with compartmentation. So there's this one, disrepair to the fabric, compromising compartmentation. There's presence of services and service ducts compromising compartmentation, and there's services not in fire-resistant enclosure. So sometimes it can be difficult to decide exactly which
So
one
if we
is.
put, say for example, under presence of services and service ducts compromising compartmentation, should we include like fire stopping in that?
Yeah, I'd include things like, where you have got pipes, cables passing through compatible walls.
Okay, that's great. So what issues do we see with compromising of compartmentation? Paul?
We did see a couple of penetration holes as well.
That's the next one.
Penetration,
Which is added. So we did see in the rise cupboards damaged plasterboard.
Did.
In fact, you could easily push a pen through one leaf.
You could, We
plasterboard.
shoved our hands into that one, didn't we?
So there was no integrity, and it needs to, a lot of them.
It's got to be at least 60 minutes, those shafts, haven't they?
Depends on the risk.
Yeah.
Minimum 30.
Oh, right, okay.
So depends on the risk. You could have a room
That's like a water.
if it's water,
That's
it's nothing there.
Yeah.
But so in the high risk areas, it was a through floor to the rise cupboard as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've got to be careful on the compartmentation, definitely around the enclosure of that.
Yeah, sure. So the important things when you've got a shaft which isn't stopped at each floor level is that you've got really good doors, really good shaft compartmentation.
Compartmentation, but it's pointless. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the Met set that we saw in there? Was there any issues with
There was-
Met set being exposed?
There was METSEC. Basically, obviously, there's 2 ways of forming a stud wall. You've got timber and you've got METSEC.
So METSEC, is that some kind of steel framing?
That's a steel frame instead of using timber. It's quick and easy
Is it
to
steel or aluminium?
erect. You can get it in different materials. In this case, it was aluminium.
Oh, okay.
And you need to look at the manufacturer's details of how it is erected and how the plasterboard has to be attached to that.
Would that be on, say, for example, St. Gobain's website, or obviously it depends on which manufacturer it is?
It could be
doesn't it?
Gyprock, what's called the White Book.
Yeah.
That gives you different scenarios of compartment walls, stud walls with different layers of plasterboard and different frame materials.
Okay. I think I saw on the top floor also when we opened up the doors, didn't we? Do you want to explain what we saw there? Yeah. That wasn't good, was it?
No. So open to the Paul already said that there were suspended floors,
Mhm.
and there was a void underneath the floor, especially on the top floor, that was open to the service shaft. So if there's a fire in the service shaft, it's reasonably foreseeable that that fire might get in under the floor of the top floor of the building.
Yeah, there's one flat on the other side.
There's just one flat on the top
Yeah.
floor, but we don't know if the void was open to the flat.
Yeah.
In which it's a worst case,
Yeah,
because we might get fire underneath the person in the flat,
Yeah.
especially while they sleep. Yuck. Otherwise, it's just their exit route that's on fire, which
Yeah.
is equally not great.
That's it.
The other floors were not brilliant either. They were where there was the void, they'd filled it with a length of timber, which it's better
Give
than
some-
nothing. It's going to give
some
something.
fires.
It's going to char and it's going to give some protection.
Yeah.
Less than ideal, but there was nothing at all on the top floor.
It seems to be quite haphazardly just cut and tapped in.
Yeah, it wasn't
rather than
necessarily
being-
one piece either. Was it? Sometimes there's an extra bit that was shoved on.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got quite a few issues there, haven't we? Generally, from looking through ceiling panels and stuff, it seemed pretty good above them. Did anyone else see any issues above that?
There was some tagging to some fire stopping. So someone has in the past gone round
Yeah.
to record.
I think we saw mention in the risk assessment of a compartmentation survey, didn't we?
That's right. The fire risk assessment, it refers to a compartmentation survey around about the same time, so I think it's January 2020.
Yeah.
And apparently we didn't see that survey ourselves, but the fire risk assessment does say there were several problems noted to the compartmentation. But like you say, Paul, we saw a lot of some work had been carried out.
Some work
like
had been carried out,
like
definitely.
new fire bats, that kind of
Fire
thing. So
bats,
hopefully
intermittent
that's-
sealants.
hopefully that's been carried out to sort out.
So the
It's not
fire
part of the
stopping
next
is
one.
the second one, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
this
we
is the
always
next one. We're wandering in, I think.
Yeah.
we
Well,
it'd be useful if they just had
easy
one
because they all
compartmentation.
they all have the same
They do
outcome,
overlap,
which
Yeah.
is
They overlap.
inadequate compartmentation.
So let's discuss the disrepair to the fabric and compromising of compartmentation, removing fire stopping. I'm thinking it's about a 2. It wasn't systematic problems, it was relatively localised. Tended to be between the fire shaft and Sorry, it was then not the fire shaft, is it? It
It
was
was
the
mainly around the vertical shaft, the
the
service
service
shaft.
shaft. Yeah,
Or also the smoke shaft.
yeah, that's
Oh, the smoke shaft too.
Yeah,
Where
floor-
we could see the floors.
Yeah,
See
you had
the
the same
floors.
problem with the
Exposure.
floor voids being open to
We
the
did.
smoke shaft.
Okay, I'm going to put to the floor, it's either a 2 or a 3.
With the
Pretty
smoke
serious.
with the smoke shaft and the smoke shaft being open to the voids of the floor, it's not fire rated. I'd possibly say 3.
Okay, everyone happy with that?
Yes.
3. So now we're going on to the presence of services and service ducts, compromising compartmentation. So, as we mentioned just then, it looks like they've had a survey done and some works following the survey. That all seems to be labelled correctly. Good standard of fire stopping, I thought.
Yes,
Generally.
we've still got to consider maybe penetration through the cladding system as well.
That's true, yeah.
You've got boiler flues since the Regulation 7 Building Amendment Regulations. Now boiler flues in high-rise buildings above 18 metres got to be non-combustible. At the time, flues to boilers did have a rating to them.
Yeah.
It wasn't an A2. And then we do have plastic ducting going out through the cavity.
Okay. Anything else to add to this? So we've got penetrations, we've got the fire stopping was generally okay.
Yeah.
Trying to think what else we might have seen.
There was a good fire bat in places, wasn't there? Also?
Yeah, the internal
Some bits had been done for
fire
sure.
stopping was
That's
on the whole
good.
good.
Okay, what didn't we see? Plant room.
We didn't
No
see
access,
that.
was there?
There was no access to that. It's, sort of a half floor beneath the ground floor, wasn't it? And it was-
So maybe we'll add a bit of a caveat to our judgment on this, that we haven't seen it. There may be stuff that's, and we might just ask the local authorities to go back when they can get a key, have a look round. Be sensible, wouldn't it? And if
Yes.
necessary, include something on the improvement notice or something. Okay, moving on to the next one.
Sorry, was that a 1?
Oh, we've scored it as a 1.
Yeah.
Everyone happy with that?
I'm happy thinking.
Okay, so services not in fire resistant enclosures, so another.
Well, most of the services went up that vertical shaft, the vertical service riser, but there was the gas that didn't.
Yes.
That seemed to go up the the inside face of the brick walls.
Okay.
The meters, if you remember, were all at the ground floor perimeter of the building on the outside.
How do we know what it goes up in? I'm just thinking, did we see some sort of gap in a cement board?
Well, in the flat we went into where they'd had a new boiler flue put in, new boiler and flue, there was a cut-out section, square piece, maybe a little bigger than my laptop, and we could see into that. You could see the gas pipe in the back of that. I think there was the brick leaf, there was the insulation
on the outside,
then a cement board, and I think it was inside the cement board face.
It
The gas
was,
pipe.
yeah, you had the outer brick leaf, the cavity.
A picture tells 1,000 words with this, doesn't it? So maybe we can refer
We took a picture
on the
of it.
film to overlay some pictures here, couldn't we?
Yeah, from my point of view, obviously we're looking at the gas safe installation and use regulations. I didn't see any gas installation should be obviously in steel piping. I never saw any
Is
pipes.
that in between the road and the meter, or where would you expect that?
There'll be technically should be going from the meter to the flats.
Okay.
But I never saw any piping on the immediate
It all seems to be copper from what I saw.
firefighting.
Which isn't unusual.
Yeah.
What's the problem with copper?
Copper's prone to movement, damage, vandalism,
Now,
solder
the
joints.
slightly complicated thing for us is that gas explosions is rated underneath a different hazard here, isn't it? So though it may pose a bit of a risk, it's essentially an explosion risk.
Yeah.
Am I right in saying that? Although, what do we see at Grenfell?
Gas contributed massively
Yeah.
to the ferocity of the fire.
Effectively a bit like a burner
Yeah.
underneath the building, wasn't it? From what I
Yeah.
work out.
So yeah, so gas is relevant to explosions, but it also obviously has an effect on fire risk as well.
Sure.
Okay, I'm
So
happy
you-
to
so
include it here then.
Yeah, you could rate it under,
Yeah.
under both and see us doing the
Yeah.
fire
We'll do the
assessment.
assessments,
We
okay.
could include that.
Okay, anything else that we need to mention? Water damage to the enclosure, we've kind of covered in as well. Yeah.
Did we have any concerns about the gas pipes? Because we've talked about them. We haven't said what our concerns are.
So they're passing unseen in cavities, aren't they? We normally see them in ventilated shafts. Is there?
And on the plus side, it means that the gas pipes aren't running through the residential area, through the common areas.
I never saw them
Sorry.
through
Yeah.
the common areas.
So
which
are
would be
you
a high-
allowed
which would be a
to
high
have
risk
gas
thing.
pipes in escape rooms and things like that?
You can't have them in the firefighting stairs.
Right.
Obviously, in some cases they can be in a common corridor. Also be protected in shaft and riser cupboards.
Yeah.
Um,
So that's the gas safe installation and use regs. Isn't it?
that's correct. And, yeah.
Okay, well I'm going to propose that we go for a 2.
I think I agree. Yeah.
It's a bit of a difficult one, though, isn't it? Okay, let's move on to the next one. Absence or inadequate record of dry riser or wet riser if the building's over 50 metres, which as isn't, and checking, which should be 6 monthly. So, certification-wise, what did we see, Stefan? Let me just check on the computer.
Check.
Basic test certificate. Gaps of information dated March. Doesn't say what year.
That's right. We had a certificate dated March.
How can you have something dated?
Did that in
without a year?
March.
Right.
So
Okay.
yeah,
Sounds
so
a little
we
bit
can't say whether it's
this year or not.
within the last 6 months.
Okay, maybe we can ask them to provide a decent certificate. Maybe go back to the person who serviced it and confirm. We could bring up the name, number on the certificate.
They might know when they did it. This is when we invoice for it.
Exactly.
That gives a year.
Okay.
Also, with the dry rising.
Disrepair.
It's
Disrepair to it.
not disrepair as such, but its location meant that if if you'd opened the door to the dry rising main and attached your delivery hose as the fire service and charged it, which makes the hose rock solid, you would not be able to open a residential corridor door.
Yeah.
It would conflict with it entirely. It might open about
Yes.
10
So this is
centimetres.
on each of the landings when they're sort of poking out the wall, weren't they?
Yeah.
That's really close to the
Really close to the residential corridor door.
north corridor.
It shouldn't be a problem. Typically, the fire service is going to start a floor, maybe 2 floors underneath the fire and go up to the fire.
Yeah.
But then if they subsequently decide they want to evacuate, they can't.
Yeah.
Or at least they can't evacuate that floor that they're working from.
Yeah. So on the
it's
top
not great.
floor, I think we saw some damage to there's quite a
Oh,
bit of
no,
ASB in the block, wasn't it? Antisocial
Yeah.
behaviour.
yeah, the glass fronts were broken on a couple of them. In fact,
Yeah.
it was missing on one of these and smashed in another.
That's right. Yeah, there was a missing key, wasn't there, from the
That was for the
fire
lift,
lift.
wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll come on to that in a bit.
What kind of risk is related to having, the doors to the dry riser outlets smashed?
Our problem with the dry risers often, especially where there's antisocial behaviour, is that people will tend to interfere with the valve assembly. Sometimes they'll take bits from them, sometimes they'll just open it when it should be closed. So when we try and charge the dry rising main, water just spills out on every landing rather than come out where we want it.
Yeah.
So it just delays getting to work and getting a decent firefighting jet operating. And it's not unusual for the fire service to send a firefighter to the top and come down and make sure that all the landing valves are shut. The other thing that can happen is that if they pull off the blank front, there's a rubber washer that sits in there that makes sure we get a decent jet of water out of it.
Yeah,
And
connection.
little fingers tend to take those out and swallow them and throw them away.
Okay, so I'm going to propose we score this as either a 3 or a 2. Thoughts?
Yeah, we'd normally go 1 if it was just the certification, wouldn't we? So
Yeah.
it's worse than that.
It is definitely worse than
We'd probably go 2.
2. I'm happy with 2. Cool.
I'm happy with 2.
Brilliant. Let's move on. Non-fire resistant doors, damaged or badly maintained doors in or opening onto common parts. So, Paul, do you want to
Start
go
off.
through quickly what we saw?
Yes, we do have a firefighting stairs which have FD30 doors attached.
FD30. In between protecting the. That sounds a little bit under.
Yeah, so in this situation you'd be expecting FD60 doors
Right.
with obviously the associated fixture fittings.
Where are we measuring the where's the risk in this
Why
flats
would
and
we need
what are we
FD60s?
what are we taking into account with that?
So it's a requirement under obviously the building regulations at the time of building.
Yeah, but so in terms of the risk is in the flats mostly here. That's where we're going to be calculating from, isn't it? So
It's
What?
a stay put strategy.
yeah,
And with the stay put strategy, that, as I mentioned earlier, the key piece is that we want people to be able to evacuate if they feel threatened by the fire.
Right.
In all other cases, it's probably safer to stay put. But if your doors are giving up too early in the fire, you're going to get smoke ingress into the staircase.
Yeah.
And now nobody's able to use that safely.
Yeah.
And so there's a reason there, and also for the safety of firefighters,
Yeah.
to make sure that that staircase is adequately protected is really important. Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, so you'll also be looking at the sort of the time from the fire to fire brigade actually entering the building as well. There was, adding to that, there was damage to the doors, certain doors which had glazing replaced, which never had any markings on to see if it was.
That's right. Yeah, we didn't see any etching.
Going back to, can I just go back to the fire resistance of these staircase doors? Would I be right in saying they need to be FD60 because there's a requirement into the building regulations for 90-minute protection between the flat and the staircase? Is that the reason we're specifying 60? So it'd be like a 30-minute flat door and a 60-minute staircase door giving 90 minutes?
Generally,
protection?
yes. The guidance for what is a firefighting shaft or firefighting stairs gives specifically a rating to the door. That's the same for flat entrance doors as well. Has to require a standard rating of an FD30. So together, 60 and 30 generally means 90 minutes.
That rating changes with the height of the building. As you get higher and higher, you increase the fire resistance that's associated with it. So it's not universally 90.
So is it in like an appendix to it, or is it in the sort of
There is-
bulk of
There is guidance in table
DB?
A2 on approved on Part B. It gives you situations where shafts also should have special locations where it needs to have fire doors.
Sure.
And the ratings together.
Okay, so in terms of disrepair, I saw quite a bit that were pretty poorly formed doors. There was some that had additional strips added to them where we're not really sure if they're going to be particularly great at functioning as a fire door under fire conditions. What else did we see?
Excessive gaps.
Yeah.
So even though they'd added these strips, there was still gaps.
Still gaps.
Poorly done, wasn't it?
Saw some UPVC door handles on some of the doors.
Yeah.
We saw doors that didn't close at all. We saw one of the staircase doors that had a broken self-closer.
I think I saw some hinges with one screw per
We saw a
hinge.
screw per hinge. There are loads of screws missing around the
Yeah.
building.
Wasn't good, was
What
it?
else did we
So,
see? Oh, we saw the spy holes missing in
oh yeah,
2 doors
Yeah.
and dropping out of one.
one door looked like it had been attempted to be levered open by
Yeah.
some ne'er-do-well.
It's also worth mentioning there is also a special requirement for duplex flats inside blocks. In this case, we had 2 doors leading out of the duplex.
That's right.
On each level.
Yeah, we saw quite a low headroom there, didn't we?
There was a low headroom to the second door.
Chopped. So
on the
on the
masonette.
actual door itself, they'd actually chopped
The door was.
straight across the corner of one of
I said the
sort of
door was
head height.
compromised. Yes.
Yeah.
Normally you'd be looking
Definitely
at
not tested with it.
no, you'd be looking at what testing has been taken with these doors.
Okay, I'm going to stop us there and just say that's a pretty clear 3 for me.
Yep.
Yeah,
Agree.
yeah, very similar to what's how the worked example was scored as well. Okay, so back on to our next relevant matter. We've got the waste hoppers, so non-fire resistant waste hoppers. We haven't got any in our building.
No
Not saw
hoppers.
any, did we? We had external bins. People took them out themselves. So score that as a 0. Let's move on. Sources of fuel, rubbish, or other flammable material, whether external or internal. So what are we really referring to here, Stefan? Any skips full of waste outside near the building?
In this block, we did have some. There was an understairs cupboard
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
with paint and some of the combustibles stored there. I think there were also
Any ignition source in there as well?
there were ignition sources, a lot of electrics in there.
Yeah, I think the main feed came in via that.
We
Yeah,
also
that's off.
we also had some combustibles stored in the service shaft.
Yes.
Possibly a bit of carbo.
Yeah, yeah. I think we also had, obviously in that, we mentioned it in the smoke control thing, but we actually had combustibles lining some parts of that second smoke shaft, didn't we? So that's it's probably covered elsewhere, so we probably wouldn't rate that, would we?
Yeah, the combustibles we saw stored in service shafts.
Yeah. But we saw that bike exercise bike, didn't we?
yeah.
Yeah. Struggled to set fire to that. didn't we?
Yeah.
Did that
Not really
Obstruction,
not
but
really
it'd be covered
combustible.
elsewhere.
And not that much of an obstruction, really. There's still a metre clear
Yeah.
width for 3 flats.
The thing is, the HHSRS it's concerned with defects to elements of a building.
The building.
I don't think you could include,
It's questionable whether or not they should be in there anyway.
yeah,
isn't it?
there possibly are some things that.
Unless it's inherent to where the
Yeah.
bins were stored or something like pushed up
If you
against the
think of the
external wall.
buckets, right, in the service shaft, they are there as a result of the leaking roof,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
But the buckets aren't part of the building, so
I don't know. It probably
I find this area really quite
Yeah.
probably possibly clutching at straws.
Okay,
There.
that's fine.
Yeah. I guess
Possibly,
it's-
how much of
As
the
long as
risk-
I know.
yeah.
It's any building feature that allows that to take place, really, isn't it? So if you had a bin complex like we saw in the north of the country, where it was positioned outside underneath an undercroft,
Yeah.
then you might want to say something about that here, I'm going to guess.
Yeah.
Although it could also be fire starting arson, just not counting it twice, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
Or if you had problems with people dumping rubbish because there
The bin store was
there
inadequate.
wasn't anywhere else for them to keep it.
Yeah.
Then because that would be
Yeah.
down to a problem with the building itself. But
Yeah.
if it's just
Okay.
people's behaviour,
So nothing really with the building, I'm
No.
going to suggest.
There was a bit of stuff around the building.
There were
but-
some combustibles, but they
management
were
issue, isn't
totally movable and management issues.
Okay, I'm going to just propose
So
zero.
left
I
with
don't
nothing.
see really-
Nothing really.
it's just-
Okay, now moving on. Inadequate waste storage. So this, again, we've just talked about waste storage. There's a few that overlap. It's
But this waste storage wasn't part of the building, was it? It's far
Yes.
away,
The refuge was
mismanaged.
by the second, well, by the vehicle access, wasn't it?
yeah.
It was external,
It's external.
quite away away
Yeah.
from the. From
Could
the
they have
park
pushed?
itself.
And this is probably comes underneath arson, but perhaps you could push a paladin up against, turn it over.
It's coming on to that, aren't we?
But realistically, the external skin is brick, so it's not going to go straight into the building, is it? It's not really much an issue. Okay, so I'm going to score that 0.
Nothing.
So moving on to the next one, which is opportunities for external intentional fire starting, arson. So external intentional. So what have we got, John?
I'll start with the fact that the site itself then wasn't that secure.
No, it wasn't there.
Yeah.
There was a gate to the car park at the rear. There was a lock around the gate post,
Yeah.
but the gate was open and it looked like it probably remained open. So there was ready access to the site. You've already said that there's opportunity maybe for putting paladins close to the building, so that's a thing. And there was evidence of fires having been started in the undergrowth. There were scorched leaves
Oh, was
and plants.
Yeah.
So
I forgot about that.
it's foreseeable, I think, as a risk.
But there was also a pathway around the outside, wasn't there? There
There was,
wasn't
yeah.
actually
And of
security.
course, we've got the gas meters
locked.
around the outside. So some
Yeah.
urchin that decides to set a fire in a gas meter or in
Yeah.
a box
Try and
with a
pinch
gas meter.
Try and pinch the copper.
We'll try and-
We've seen that before, haven't
Yeah. Absolutely.
we? Okay, so we've got some issues there, quite bad, and so I'm kind of
Worse
thinking
than
of 2.
average.
Yeah,
Higher than average.
yeah, worse than average 2.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
2. Great stuff. Okay, moving on to the next one. External unintentional fire starting. So a car fire pushed up against the wall system.
There was one
skid
car
fires,
parking space
barbecues
up
and
again
barbecues.
close to the building. All the others were quite far
It was,
away.
Yeah.
And that was the
It was
one
still some
space
distance
was
away, wasn't it?
still a bit of a distance away and it was against brick predominantly.
Yeah.
But we did see those barbecues on balconies.
Yeah.
So there's potential there.
Okay.
The light fittings, it's mostly about balconies, I think.
Okay, so
Or a passing train on the line that burst into flame. No.
no, come on, that's not silly. Okay, that's I'm going to score that as a 1. 2 concern.
Not
The-
pushing back.
The balconies themselves weren't ideally suited for barbecues. We did see one on there, but that's probably a very hardened barbecue, isn't it? We didn't see a multitude of them around there, and they were quite tight spaces, weren't they? So I would think most people wouldn't really want to barbecue on there.
Yeah, most people probably
2 by 1.
use a disposable one.
Yeah,
On
but
wood.
even worse. Yeah, and we do see sometimes scorch marks. So
Sometimes
we saw that
Yeah,
up
so
north.
there's potential for them to be used as
Yeah.
well, because if they really
If they were really intent on doing it.
Well, we
Okay.
consider over the next 12 months, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm happy with the 1. I'm not pushing back.
Let's agree on 1. Lack of controlled access or other security measures to the building, allowing unauthorised access or risk of arson. John,
Well, there
we
was
mentioned this previously, didn't we?
There was a rear exit door that was not secured in any way. It was not lockable, and anybody could wander in off the street and get access to the building.
I remember looking at the actual
There was just like a screw in the lock,
solid,
wasn't there?
jammed the screw into
Yeah.
it, haven't they?
It
And
was
screwed it in. That's great. Okay, so that's a pretty, and we've got ASB in the area.
Once you're in, you had access to the whole building.
Yeah, there's no
There was
floor locks,
No
was there?
other security measures in
Yeah.
there. The entrance lobby had a bin in it and the notice board.
There was a couple of fire shaft doors that weren't locked as well, wasn't there? The one that was taped together.
Yes,
We didn't mention that earlier, but yeah, there's weaknesses, isn't there?
I managed to lock it.
Oh, well done. That's good. improve that. Okay, I'm going to propose.
I think with the arson outside and the insecure building, that it appears to me that there was an arsonist somewhere in the area.
Yeah.
I'd go above 1.
Okay. 2.
Yeah, 2. I think
Maybe
you could,
3.
you could even push it up to a 3 because just like you said, anybody can just walk in off the street and
Yeah.
straight into the building,
Gates
into the
open,
staircase
doors
corridors.
open.
Yeah.
3. Okay, 3.
Stick it down to 3.
It's a 3.
Let's change that to 3. Right, lightning protection system. Did we see anything? We didn't get onto the roof, did we? So I saw something around the
Saw the
perimeter.
earthing rod points around the
Rod
perimeter.
points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seemed to be going down the cavity, didn't it?
I think
The
maybe
actual
they
metal
were. Yeah.
bar or whatever you call it.
I don't think we've seen any certificates relating to the
No.
Right.
safety of the
What would
lightning
we expect to see?
protection system, but I can't remember the acronym for it.
Atlas?
Atlas.
Atlas, that's one of them. I think there might be
Yeah,
possibly others as well.
Of the lightning
But
association.
we haven't seen anything associated with it.
Okay. That's so if we've got
No
nothing
certificate.
obviously wrong,
Normally go with a 1, don't we?
go with
Just-
a 1. Yeah. Let's move on. Issues with building design. Means of escape, lobbies, increased fire loading in common parts.
There's no firefighting lift. It's part of the design, it's just a regular passenger lift.
Yeah. Although there was a key next to it saying that it was
No, there wasn't. There was a key box.
a key box, so
There was no key.
key for firefighting lift.
The
or
key box
something.
was empty.
Key box was empty and it wasn't firefighting lift. So yeah, that's pretty bad. So why would that be a risk to the building?
It's about the ability of the fire service to get their equipment to the upper floors, which just makes for a speedier rescue.
So we're not out of breath.
I mean, might be in the basement, but did anybody see any secondary supplies?
I didn't see any, no. So why would
To be fair,
why
I
would
didn't see
you have
primary
secondary
supplies.
supply?
So if there was a fault with the primary supply or
So power cut.
power cut,
Is that for the
disconnection,
lift? Is it?
damage,
For the firefights?
well, be firefighting lift, emergency lighting, could be for life safety systems such as AAVs and
So you'd probably see 2 large diameter pipes
could be-
going into it.
Well,
You've got a
you-
switch.
You normally see a transfer box,
Yeah.
but also secondary supply can also be generators as well.
I've seen a few of those. Okay, I'm going to say no firefighting lift over 18 metres. It is a requirement, isn't it? I'm going to put this down as a 3. I'd accept 2, but
In terms of the design, would this be an appropriate place to put the failure of the smoke shaft to extend above the roof line?
as long as you're not double counting it, because
Yeah.
we've kind of counted that already.
But it feels like a better place
Smoke
to put it because
Yeah.
all the smoke stuff we've spoken about already feels like it's about means of escape and,
Yeah.
and people.
Yeah,
Whereas
actually, yeah,
this is a
maybe
building design piece where it
Yeah.
simply doesn't come high enough.
we could move it down from the upper section of the report.
And for me, that would nail on a 3.
Yeah.
Let's go with 3 then. Okay, electrical fire hazards, installation, meters, fuses, wiring and sockets, etc. So we saw some water ingress near electrical switches and wiring.
So some damp
into
electrical
the
switches.
shaft. We saw some damp on the
Sockets,
drips on the fire smoke shaft
Smoke shaft control.
controls. Anything else?
The electrical certificates, they identified deficiencies with the system.
Good. Okay, I'm going to propose a 3 for this.
Feels
3.
like a 3.
Definitely 3 or nail on, isn't it? Nailed on. Okay, moving onwards. Complexity of the building. It wasn't complex. I don't think I even need to ask you this.
No, I
It
think
had a complex
ADB.
roof layout,
Yeah.
and it's complex to describe, but in itself, in its layout, not complex at all. I agree.
And any complexity doesn't have an effect on fire risk on this block.
Yeah.
Safety of residents.
travel distance were pretty
When
normal.
might we rate this as a 3?
Well,
Some
not about
examples.
3, but things that you might want to we'd include into this is see if there's commercial premises beneath, if it's got
3-storey basement.
underground car park,
Yeah.
anything that's in
Communicating.
additional to your usual
Yeah.
residential
Yeah.
premises.
Yeah, take that. Okay, moving on to our final one, which is site-specific issues in flats that are not identified above. So sort of ignition sources, things like that in flats.
I mean, there are gas hobs and gas ovens.
I think it was electrical, but I agree on the gas.
hob.
At least gas,
Yeah, what did you see in yours? It
uh,
could be electrical.
gas hob. I didn't have a look in the ovens, but definitely gas hobs.
Yeah, it seemed to be. When I asked the tenant, she said it was electric oven.
Yeah, I
So,
think we've done 23.
so I think there's probably a higher fire risk associated with
With
gas
being
hobs
gas.
and with electric hobs.
Yeah. Site-specific issues with common parts not identified above. That's the one. So I did actually mention it for the layout of the roof is complex.
Yeah.
No particular fire issues noted.
Real issues.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
0 there.
Okay, so that sort of concludes the first part of this. And now we're going to move on to the harm outcomes. So here we are now considering our relevant matters for the harm outcomes. So we've got the two tabs at the bottom here, so likelihood and harm outcomes. So we've basically set up our spreadsheet so that it pastes the answers that we gave and the evidence that we had for the relevant matter for likelihood onto the harm outcomes. So there's not really much point in me wasting your time when this is actually just pasted in from the other. So I'm going to quickly go through this. So we've got a score of a 2, a 2, a 0, a 0. These are exact pastes from the other part of it. So what we've actually done is actually highlighted just in this box here the relevant matters that we do need to actually detail, which are slightly different from the likelihoods. So if I then sit back down. So the first one that we're going to consider is the single route of escape to a place of safety or issues with the availability of alternative escape routes. John, do you want to talk about the single escape route?
Well, there was just the one escape stair, access and escape stair, and firefighting stair. Once you got to the foot of the staircase, there was the front door right in front of you, and there was a rear exit through that back residential corridor. That's the one that was unlocked and available to anybody.
That's right,
that
yeah,
had
that's the
access
one
to
with the
the
screw
building.
in the door.
That's right. So anybody descending from the upper floors, I think without question would go through the front door. If there was a problem in the staircase enclosure, then anybody living in the back corridor, they could easily go out the back back exit. Everybody else
they
would
could
have to
also
pass through the
jump over
staircase.
their balconies.
They could jump
Worst
over
comes
their
to the
balconies.
worst, didn't they?
Yeah.
Pass the kids over.
Anybody else from the upper floors would have to come down through that staircase in any, in every respect. So
what sort of
single staircase.
risks does that pose? What sort of to our harm outcomes? So our harm outcomes is it's sort of preloaded into the actual spreadsheet, isn't it? So when we do our calculation, is it likely to increase the risk of death, for example, if we've only got one way out of the building?
Yeah, if that way out of the building is compromised with smoke or with fire, or there's a heat layer at some point that somebody has to pass through, absolutely they might not get out of there. So I think it contributes, and that's why the safety of the staircase is so important, and why on our likelihood we were talking about 60-minute fire doors to protect the staircase.
Yeah.
It's all a part of making sure that anybody who wants to descend it can do so in safety.
So thinking around this issue in terms of if we had a 2 or 3 story basement with a fire down there, they will definitely have to pass through that heat layer, won't they?
They would.
That smoke layer. So that might be something to call it a 3. We've only got 1 escape route, so I'm kind of happy with a 2 here rather than a 3.
Yeah, possibly a 3. If you didn't have the 2 directional escape at ground floor level, possibly a 3.
It's all going through one door.
Yeah, but still the single staircase. It does mean
And it wasn't a terribly high building.
It wasn't, no.
Not terrible at all.
We've only got sort of ground floor.
It was only just over the threshold for the extra.
But having a single staircase, it still increases the risk of people having to escape through smoke-filled.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
2's about right.
That is about right, yeah. So the next one is narrow route escape to place of safety. So I think we measured this, didn't we? Because we thought it looked slightly encroached into the building regulations.
It was a touch narrow for a firefighting staircase. So you might think the fire service, and they do have to get lots of equipment up to the different floor plates. Now they should be able to use the firefighting lift, But if the fire is on first or second floor, they'll operate from the ground.
Yeah.
And taking that equipment up the staircase, it had a couple of pinch points that just narrowed it down by 10 centimetres, which doesn't sound a lot, but it might be enough for them not to get certain pieces of equipment or to struggle a little bit getting
just
up there.
delaying the sort of time
But
response.
in terms of resident safety, not all that much.
No, it shouldn't be coming
The
down
only
there.
issue would, if it's particularly narrow, because the fire service is going to lead its hose up the staircase, it will snake up there and it can make it more hazardous for people coming down if they want to.
If you had a particularly tight corner then where you had to get it round, very limited thing, could you get kinking in those?
Yeah, you could. Yeah,
Um,
the hose will tend
hose
to
pipe.
snake.
Yeah.
It's not a straight line and it's very difficult to lead it up a staircase in a straight fashion. So it can cause some problems, but it's later in an operational incident.
Okay, so it's more narrow than building regulations by 10 centimetres. What is the actual building regulation? Do you know?
110.
110. So it's a metre one. If it was a simultaneous evacuation policy there, so this isn't our building, but if it was, and you've got a child and parent, width-wise, is that sort of wide enough for them both to sort of walk down hands?
I would assess it's probably wide enough for the number of people we had in that building, even if you wanted to walk side by side with an infant.
More of an issue if you've got really tall
The
buildings.
taller it is, the
lots of
worse it
people.
gets.
Yeah.
The higher the number of people, the worse it gets.
So we've rated this as a 1.
I think that's
Happy with
about
that?
right.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's only just under the requirements.
Moving on to the next one then, obstructions to the route of escape, such as mobility scooters, prams, push chairs, the presence of which may indicate a lack of storage within flats.
Not really, it's just the exercise
There
bike.
was that
wasn't
one
it?
exercise bike, very temporary there.
And I think it was
rubbish.
more there because somebody decided to
To
dump
throw it out than to.
rather than they haven't got enough
Yeah.
room
Yeah.
for it.
So.
Yeah. Flats weren't too
Flats.
bad sized actually, were they? Inside. Okay, about average. So I've scored that as a 0.
Agree.
I can fully agree on that. The next one in yellow is absence of or disrepair to emergency lighting. So this is the first time we've mentioned emergency lighting, isn't it?
It is, yes.
I guess, well, I suppose because the harms would increase if you can't see to find your way out, you're going to linger in those affected areas for longer. The emergency lighting was fine. There was a good provision of emergency lighting throughout the premises, including outside exit doors, which was spot on. We tested it. I think on the 3rd floor there was a little test point. I got my fish key out and tested it, and it was fine on that floor. So if we were to, we've still got the issues with the damp.
Yeah.
But the emergency lighting worked when tested. So I don't know that you would see that will get worse over the next 12 months, or I don't know how you want to view that. But
Okay.
I thought it was okay.
So localised issues with some luminaries. Is this what we're talking with? Not seeing a charge light or something? What was
I
that?
don't know. I
think
didn't
it
notice.
Was that from the
Possibly what-
certification?
The plastic to one of the luminaries, it was a bit,
Like gone a bit opaque. hasn't it?
cloudy, but I don't think it was too bad.
Not so much that it
it's
would
not-
affect the
not very
functioning really. Okay, fair enough. So we've seen the test certificate and it says it is okay. So we're going to score that as a 0. And then down to lack of suitable access to the building for firefighters. So John,
Yes.
you know more about this than I.
I think it happens a lot, in particular in London areas where there are real constraints to the site and things get difficult for getting vehicle access to a building. But there really wasn't much vehicle access to this one. There was the front elevation, that was fine. So the main road runs past it, no issues with that. But if you wanted to get to the side or to the rear,
Struggling really, aren't you?
you really weren't going to get an appliance around.
You'd probably have to shoot it from shoot your jet of water from the front and back really, aren't you?
It's on foot,
Yeah.
and it's making the best of a bad job really. Maybe working from ladders, confined pitches, things like that.
There was a car park at the side.
There was.
The I think the gate
But
was
the access
quite narrow.
gate was narrow for fire service
Yeah.
access, wasn't it?
We measured 2.7 metres, I think, wasn't it? And we need
3.1.
3.1. So 40 centimetres, probably going to stop any fire
Yeah,
lorry from
even
getting down.
pulling
isn't
your
it?
wing mirrors in. is not good, is
Even
it?
chopping off the gate post, I think they're going to be struggling there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've scored that as a. Can you see it on there?
Two.
Lost it now.
Two, I think.
Yeah, I'm not with two.
Because I think there should have been at least 50% vehicular access.
Yeah.
And it was probably around about 25%.
Okay. Moving on to the next one, inadequate external lighting. No issue, pretty adequate. I think we saw it during
That's
the
pretty
day, but sometimes it's difficult to tell. But we saw enough luminaries around the car park,
There were lights
etc.
around every exit door.
Street
The
light,
roofs were
borrowed
pretty
light.
well
Not too
illuminated.
concerned. So we scored that as a 0. Inadequate signage on what to do in case of fire and routes of escape.
Yeah.
Now, over to you. Not happy.
Not really. There were a couple of fire action notices in place. There's one on the top floor, which only served one flat in any case.
Yeah.
But it told people in a stay-put environment that they should raise the alarm using the nearest call point, that they should go to the assembly point and report to the manager of the assembly point. Well, there wasn't an assembly point, there was no manager, and there were no call points.
Mm.
So it pretty inaccurate fire action notice. There was a second version of that notice, haphazardly adhered to a smoke control door, I think on floor 2.
Yeah.
It was just kind of a jaunty angle and just, I don't know, it looked like somebody had slapped it on there. And then there was a third notice on an A4 printed piece of paper attached to the notice board, wasn't it? And that one was a proper stay put policy fire action notice. I suppose the majority of people would see that one.
Yeah.
It's ground floor, it's where they pick up the mail.
Yeah.
And fewer people would see the top one, but it was confused through the whole building. It wasn't clear, and there were some inaccuracies.
Okay, I'm going to suggest we put a 2 for that.
I'd go with 2.
Confusing. Almost does exactly what it shouldn't do.
Yeah.
Confuses people. I mean, you could put 3 for that. How bad can it be before you? I suppose it's
I think
contradicts the actual.
in examples
Doesn't stay
where we
put when
have
it's
a stay put and there's a simultaneous
Yeah.
alarm in place, I think
That's
that gets
even worse.
really confusing.
Yeah.
In this one, at least they're not going to get a false signal.
And that is something we come across sometimes.
We do.
It's like somebody's just
Yeah.
gone ahead and stuck any old notice that totally conflicts with
Yeah.
what the actual policy should be.
Okay, let's move on. I'm going to put 2 down for that.
Yeah.
Happy. Inadequate distance between the building and external place of safety. That was adequate as far as I was concerned. Do you want to
Yes.
talk a little bit?
There was a bus depot immediately opposite the front of the building, wasn't there? So you could literally come out of the building and catch a bus. It's ideal, so no issues with that. My only issue would have been if the access gate was ever locked. So we had the padlock around the gate post.
Yeah.
If that gets locked at night, for example, and people were to use the rear exit, they could find themselves trapped in the car park and unable to escape. But then I think they could get around the building to the front, couldn't they, from the other side? So
Train
not really an issue for me.
North. Okay, site-specific issues. We scored that as a 0, by the way. So site-specific issue not identified above. So we mentioned water damage, didn't we?
Yeah, we've already discussed this.
Discussed that already.
The
So,
likelihoods.
so we've got water damage that could affect the smoke ventilation system over the next 12 months. We saw some slight drips down the front, didn't we?
We did,
That looked like they dried up. Okay, that sort of concludes this sort of section.
Okay, so now we're going to score the hazard of fire for the building. First thing we need to do is
What age is
decide-
it? What age is this building? So we've got
Oh yeah.
2005-ish, I think.
2005. I think that was our planning. We checked in the planning system, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, so first thing we need to consider is what kind of dwelling it is. Flats. The age of the dwelling, posted in 1979. Yeah,
Agreed.
and so that brings up the averages for that kind of building.
So the national average on the left-hand side there is 1800. That's
Yeah.
the sort of mid-scale point, isn't it?
Yeah, 1 in 1,800.
1 in 1,800.
Yeah, so we need to consider that, how our building compares with that, and try and decide on the likelihood of harm for this building.
Likelihood and harm, yeah.
Yeah, likelihood of harm, and then we have to consider the spread of house.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So, how much worse than an average building is this?
It's quite a bit
For a
worse.
typical post 1979.
We've also got a worked example to help us
Yeah.
decide what the likelihood is. Yeah, so we need to consider that as well.
Yes.
In the worked example, I think the likelihood was 1 in 180. On that block, I think it was completely clad in category 3 ACM. There were quite a few other deficiencies in the block as well.
Yeah, from memory, it had fire doors with letterboxes in that weren't intumescent letterboxes.
That's right. So we've got defective fire doors to all flats.
Oh, we've got that.
We have got
Our doors don't
Yeah,
close,
we've
and
got
they've got various issues with them.
I think they had problems with bin chutes opening into the staircase or the corridor, and possibly there was a problem with
We
the
don't have bin
with
chutes,
the doors to the bin
so
chutes.
that's better.
We've got a lot of ASB in this property, haven't we? I mean, that's something that is an issue. We've got evidence
It's
of
not
arson.
secure. Yeah.
We've got kids probably playing with
Who knows?
who knows what on the common parts.
The worked example of it, the block was a lot taller, and again single staircase.
Yeah, it wasn't that tall.
No.
And it wasn't covered in ACM.
No. So how much of an issue is the external wall system? I guess
Yeah,
is
how
one of the
concerned-
most important relevant matters for all this.
It's
good.
got panels on it, Bernie stuff,
Mm.
but the Bernie stuff is in kind of quite discrete locations. So even if you set fire to it, it's really not going to spread around the building. And it's difficult to envisage how a fire might get into it in the first place, and if it does get into the cladding system, it's very difficult to see how that will subsequently affect people. Certainly in the early stages of the fire, if you allow the fire to develop uninhibited and fire service don't turn up for 40 minutes, then maybe there are some issues. But assuming things work reasonably as they should, it's very difficult to see how the presence of the cladding in this particular case is a hazard in itself.
So I think that we've got a lot of lower level issues, slightly. I mean, the fire doors are a big issue. But there's a lot of lower level issues, more issues than there is in the
Worked example.
worked example.
And,
So
yeah,
if I can just sort of point towards our worked example is 1 in 180 here, isn't it?
yeah.
So it's
Another
better
big
than that.
difference, possibly the biggest difference, the worked example is totally clad in category 3 ACL.
Yeah.
You could easily get, there's windows everywhere, so you could easily get a flat fire getting into that cladding and spreading it around the block. But we're not so concerned with the external walls for this
Yeah.
building.
So I'm kind of thinking there, but then we've got a lot of things at lower level. So I'm kind of thinking we're moving more towards about 320.
Yeah, it's definitely quite, not as bad as the worked example, so lower than
Yeah.
180, but
Yeah. We
still-
definitely haven't got
Yeah.
anything up here, have we? There's nothing
Oh, no,
to indicate we need to be
But no,
well up here.
it's still quite a bit worse than the national average. So yeah, 1 in 320 sounds about right.
1 in 320. I'm happy with 320. Okay. So if we can just move that downwards then. So our harm outcomes, which are these, so this is 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is sort of 100 minus these 3. So what do we know about this building? So it's been preloaded, taking into account the typical injury from a building of this age. Is that right?
This age and this type of dwelling, so a flat, post 1979 flat.
Yeah. So the national average is 4.6 for a class 1, so tends to be death or permanent disablement. It's that sort of thing, isn't it? Class 1.
Yeah.
Joke tends to be death, doesn't it?
That's right. Most of the things we've just discussed about the likelihood, they're just as applicable to the harm outcomes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it
So it's
definitely needs to be
definitely up from national average. Are you happy with that?
Yeah, but again, not as bad as the worked example.
Okay.
Worked example for class 1 homes is 21.5.
Okay.
So
It's not as bad as that, is it?
Well,
No,
this
it's
is
not
the national
as bad.
average with the an entire ACM clad building. That fire is breaking into every window, every flat. If it does that at nights while people sleep, it's dreadful.
With the state
I think
put
the
policy
worst-
that's not telling
Worst
them
case for our
Yeah.
state put policy is that you might affect one floor
Yeah.
of people, but it's not spreading up the building or around the building. So it's sort of one corridor, so maybe 3 flats at most might be affected by a single fire.
Yeah.
Not many more.
So still a bit worse than your average.
So not
block
your
of
average.
sage.
I would argue should be a single flat is affected. Maybe it bounces up the building into the next one, but that
Yeah.
should be a minor kind of fire compared to the burnout underneath. So we're a little worse than that, I would suggest.
Okay.
So worse than national average, not as bad as the worked example. I'd say
Split it in the middle.
yeah, we should move up to 10, I think.
10. Just populate that. So class 2 is rather interesting, isn't it? Because this is quite serious, tends to represent quite serious burn injuries, which might be permanently disfiguring, may, well, you can imagine what a severe burn is like. It's quite nasty. And it's interesting that the stats for when they actually generated it are as low as they are, because it's effectively saying there's no chance of serious burn.
Yeah, in your average block
flats.
of this age, national average is 0,
Which is
which
interesting.
is quite strange.
Very interesting. So
I
think
would
there's a fair
imagine
chance.
that's because most people are going to be asphyxiated by the smoke long before they become burnt.
exactly. I'm not sure that the stats take into account people who are found in common parts rather than just the flat. Because if you're in the flat at the source of the fire, you tend to either die or get out.
I'm not
It's
sure.
an interesting statistical anomaly, I think. But
I'd
back onto how we'd score it.
Yeah, in this block, I say it's going to be worse than the national average, class 2 house.
Yeah. How far up would you go?
I think the worked example, it gives 0.5 for a class 2 house, so again, not as bad as the worked example.
Yeah.
Possibly
2.
0.2.
Yeah. That's good. And then class 3, what sort of injuries have we got with class 3?
Smoke inhalation.
Smoke
Checked over
inhalation.
by the
Yeah.
ambulance.
Less serious burns.
Yeah. It's probably like an arm burn rather than your entire body, which would be class 2.
Tiny body, dead end.
Oof, tend to be, yeah. Long term. Right, so
There is
national
21.5,
average is
is that
21.5.
Yeah. So again, same reasoning again. I think the
would be worse than the national average.
worse than the national
Not certainly
average.
worse than the work example.
It'll be better than
Better than
the
that example.
but worse than the national average. Eh?
Better than
Okay, so 31.6 or
31.6, I'd say.
okay, and that should auto populate the class 4 harms, which is a hospital trip, but maybe mild smoke inhalation where it's discharged quite quickly. So that, if we move downwards, gives us a hazard rating of band E. How does that sort of compare against other buildings that we've inspected, Stefan?
It's
I think that's about right.
yeah. Thinking about previous blocks where we've scored it, it does seem that our feeling about the level of risk in this block is round about right. I think
What did the works example?
that was band C. It's about 1,200, 1,300. So not that bad. I mean, not as bad as the worked example, but quite a bit worse than the national average, or what the average likelihood. I'm not quite sure what that is, but
Sure.
it won't be as bad as it.
Okay, we're now just going to talk through how we've come to a overall total of 345. So, for a Class 1 harm, the weighting that is reprogrammed into the HHSRS is 10,000. We then multiply that by the chosen likelihood, which we have chosen to be 1 in 320. That is then multiplied by 10, which is class of harm, which we've chosen for our Class 1. So, all that maths together gives us a total of 312.5. For Class 2 harms, the weighting is 1,000 multiplied by 1 over 320, so that's obviously a fraction. Multiply that by our 0.2, this gives us 0.63, so there's not an awful lot of increase to the score because of that. We've then got Class 3 harms, so the weighting that's included in the HHSRS is 300. We multiplied that by 1 over 320, the fraction. We then multiply that by 31.6, which is what we've chosen for Class 3, which gives us 29.63. The remnants of the 100 minus those three gives us 58.2. So we've multiplied 10, which is the weighting for Class 4 harms, multiply that by 1 over 320, and then multiply that by 58.2. Gives us a total of 1.82. We then sum that, which gives us 345, which, if we compare that in the operating guidance to the hazard bands, gives us an E, which is a Category 2 hazard. So any future enforcement action, if we were to serve an improvement notice, for example, would be under Section 12 of the Housing Act. So that's the importance of why it's a Category 2 hazard. Okay, thanks for your time today, gentlemen, and hopefully we'll move on and do some rigorous enforcement on this building.